Hello and welcome to the Fortune's Weave sequel theory craft video. The last video was a 35-minute lore deep dive which set up the possibility that this new game could take place as a prequel or midquel to Three Houses. The nature of this video is the same, but it's just for a sequel. I should note that the way this video is written is that you've watched the previous one. So if I end up randomly talking about something for the first time, it's because I'm assuming you've watched that one and you're caught up. But if you haven't seen that video yet, I strongly recommend you do so now. I'm going to briefly state now that the arguments with regard to Dietrich and the displaced crest bearers and heroes' relics can be recontextualized to fit a sequel setting. If that coat of arms is in fact for House Lamine, then it could be established or re-established in a sequel. As for crest sightings, those could have just found their way outside of Fodlan just like before.
The years were long, weren't they? Have you forgotten me so soon?
The main goal of this video is to explain Sothis' appearance to argue in favor of that scene taking place at the same time as the rest of the trailer. The last video argued that because we don't know when that scene takes place in the story, it's meant to serve as a red herring to confuse the viewer. It could be a flashback or even a fourth wall break, but instead of dismissing that scene, this video lays out the history of the attempts to revive Sothis and how she could come back while following the rules of the story and the rules made by the developers themselves. So this video assumes that everything in that trailer is happening at once. But I do believe that in order to make sense that this is a sequel, we have to figure out one simple thing. How can Sothis return? Last video's historic timeline of events stopped after Nemesis was defeated and Rhea rewrote Fodlan's history. With Sothis' remains in the form of the Sword of the Creator, Rhea then focused for centuries to revive her mother to allow her to once again watch over Fodlan. Sothis in Three Houses calls experimenting on the dead to bring them back to life and things of that nature as questionable. It breaks taboo. Supplementary material in Fire Emblem Heroes reveals Sothis explicitly forbade anyone from reviving her. Even though this is supplementary and not technically canon to Three Houses proper, we can at best say it's questionable and at worst a forbidden practice. We are once again revisiting the Rite of Rising. In Imperial Year 185, Seiros gathered the four apostles to try and bring Sothis back to life. She had them pour their blood into the Chalice of Beginnings, an ancient Nabatean artifact to perform the Rite of Rising, but it completely backfired, and instead of a returned goddess, a massive monstrosity rose up instead. Given its name, Chalice of Beginnings, it is possible the chalice failed to accomplish its purpose because it required Sothis' assistance in some form to work. After all, she is credited by Rhea for reviving the land after the whole ordeal with Agartha. What Rhea tells us in Cindered Shadows is that Sothis created the Chalice of Beginnings with the Apostles' crests in mind. No other crests will do. The chalice itself has the crests on it. Its purpose is to restore a physical form that was previously lost to this world, but Rhea specifies to Claude that it doesn't fully bring people back to life. She says, and I quote, "It can breathe life into a body, but it cannot return a spirit that has already departed." This would explain why the rite, in both known instances of it being performed, was a dud, first with Sothis' remains as the Sword of the Creator, and then with Sitri's long-dead body. The functionality of the chalice and its origins is difficult to understand, mainly because in both instances, the rite doesn't even work. Which begs the simple question, how does it work successfully? The four apostles, once again, probably assisted in the creation of the chalice. Their specific blood is required to quote-unquote activate it, and I personally believe it's meant to act like a biometric security requirement, which sounds silly, but let me cook. There's nothing in-game to show there's something special about the blood of an ice, snow, bloom, and dark dragon in a vacuum. Probably nothing terribly relatively unique about Saint Oban, Chevalier, Noah, and Timotheus besides them happening to be quite advanced in these kinds of practices. Either way, it's unclear what exact function the blood of these four crests plays in the rite, be it a biometric lock or used to fuel the bodily aspect of the rite, but it is certainly needed, for the chalice is able to directly absorb the blood from the bodies of the Ashen Wolves and fill the chalice without having to cut them and pour the blood in. The blood of the apostles was needed, and it was speculated by Elfric, based on what limited documents the church had left of the rite, that there simply wasn't enough blood sacrificed. So he hoped that if he filled the chalice to its brim, it would bring Sitri, Byleth's mother and longtime friend, back. This of course didn't work, and what came of it was an umbral beast. Rhea states something similar happened when she and the apostles tried to bring Sothis back with the rite centuries ago.
Lady Rhea, what precisely is the purpose of this ritual?
We've heard it has the power to resurrect life, but that can't be true, can it?
The chalice is a holy artifact, created by the goddess herself. It serves to restore a physical form that was previously lost to this world.
So those wild tales are true. It really can bring someone back to life.
The game never actually explains why in both attempts of the Rite, it fails. I think it's because simply the characters themselves don't know why. Rhea wrote the documentation, but she wasn't there when the chalice was first created. The apostles might know, but they're long gone. Sothis would know, but she's quote-unquote dead. I think there are two explanations. The first is very simple and straightforward, the second is much less simple. Either way, they're both conjecture. Theory 1 states simply, Sothis cannot be resurrected. Fodlan culture already recognizes that playing God is taboo, and Sothis, at least in supplementary material, forbade it. It could be that the chalice and/or the Rite is designed with that restriction. In Sitri's case, either she may not be resurrected, either as her creation is directly linked to Sothis given that her crest is what gave her life, even though she has no crest stone in her corpse during the time of the Rite. Alternatively, she cannot be resurrected because the nature of her creation and her death is already breaking the natural cycle of life. Rhea created her, and while alive she was functionally human, but she does not decompose in death. This phenomenon is beyond the understanding of Rhea herself. Sitri's life and death run against the laws of nature, so it's possible that the Rite simply doesn't, well, cover that kind of health insurance. Theory 2 goes quite deeper, because Rhea mentions something interesting about bodies and spirits and souls. In fact, both Houses and Hopes explore many ideas surrounding the housing and rehousing of souls.
Not exactly. It can breathe life into a body, but it cannot return a spirit that has already departed.
She's correct, because the only one who can do that, potentially, is Sothis herself. At least this is what this video theorizes. Due to the ambiguity of Sothis' role in the Rite, even down to Rhea claiming to one of her followers that Seiros created it, then switching stories and telling the lords that Sothis did, it's outright not possible to objectively explain why the Rite failed. Sothis is otherwise known as the arbiter of every soul. In my opinion, Rhea's calling her the judge and overseer of souls, but what exactly does this qualification entail? Since the game doesn't outright say that she can rehouse a lost or departed soul, the strongest argument for Sothis being the missing piece in the Rite is that she can escape from Zahras.
The time has finally come to unleash the forbidden spell of Zahras upon our enemies!
But what actually is Zahras? And more to the point of the sequel video, why does it matter? Zahras is the Void. It's a realm beyond space and time. Not much is known about it, but we know it does have a set of rules once it's entered. Epimenides states that this darkness is a mirror for the soul, and once a soul is imprisoned here, it is eternally severed from the real world. Given that Epimenides' body was destroyed, and Arvel too only exists as a spirit in Shez, it's almost certain that the Epimenides we fight is only his spirit, which due to being in Zahras, is able to take on a tangible form as it is related to souls. This explanation essentially means that whatever confines have existed in the corporeal world, the soul is liberated from them, but also cannot escape. This explains why Edelgard becomes herself again, even though in Azure Gleam, Talus used a spell to reduce her to an obedient little child. But once she returns from Zahras, her body and soul is chained once more. Additionally, Epimenides is something of an expert on souls, as he seems to be the creator of what Mycen calls cores. Agarthan cores seem to be based on crest stones and contain the soul of a being, with the core placed in the heart of said being. It's effectively a man-made crest stone, but used to house a human soul. It's not relevant to the video's topic right now, but it is at the very least important to understand how the Agarthans even get to Zahras. In 3 Houses, when Solon uses Kronya's Agarthan core to cast the spell and send Byleth into the void, by all means that was supposed to be the end of them and Sothis. But over the course of the game to this point, Sothis was beginning to remember who she really was.
Apologizing won't make things right! This darkness is terrifying! As you and I are one, I too am trapped within this void. But please consider this. This realm of darkness we are in is separate from the world from which you came. I mean that it would take a god to leave this place. In time, our hearts and minds will cease to be. Are you prepared to die? I thought as much. I also do not wish to die. And yet... there is no other choice. Do you recall your father's diary? He said you were a child who never cried nor laughed. I think I am the one to blame. I must have been asleep, but even then, I feel I was a part of you. I do not know how Rhea managed it, but she allowed me to exist inside of you. The truth is, I have always been with you. It is within you that I found my power yet again. The power of a goddess. The power of the progenitor god. My name is Sothis. By now, you must be well aware of what that means. I am the one who watches over Fodlan and the creatures dwelling there. I am Sothis, she who died and then returned. There is but one thing left to do to save us from this darkness of eternity. I must now use the power of a god. However, I lack a body of my own, and so I must relinquish all the power that I have to you. The time has come for you and I to join as one. And when that comes to pass, then I shall disappear.
It's not stated in-game whether or not Sothis even knows what Zahras is. There is no historic documentation of a realm beyond time and space, and this place existed before Sothis even arrived on the continent from outer space. Zahras is only known to be opened by the Agarthans. What we know, however, is that despite Sothis not even knowing how the Void operates, she can manifest her powers here, and knows that a goddess can escape it. In her prime, were she here, I don't doubt she could escape it easily. But for now, all she has is Byleth as her vessel. This is the moment when she fuses with them to pass her void-traveling powers onto them. It's why it's at this specific moment they cut through the void and escape. Similarly, Epimenides can travel to and from Zahras, and he somehow also mastered this realm. When he's finally defeated and Arval regains control at the end of their fight, he presumably grants the exact same power to travel out of the void to his vessel. Shez wields the power of Epimenides in the same way that Byleth wields the power of Sothis. One has a core, one has a crest, but they both fuse to their vessel and break through Zahras. Notice as well, Sothis and Epimenides don't just access this darkness. They can manifest places and things here. Sothis manifests her entire throne room. Epimenides seemingly has set up Agarthan technology, though whether these were the results of colonization by the Agarthans or simply Epimenides manipulating the environment is unclear. But he can manifest illusions of himself and phantoms of the Three Lords, and they're as real as it gets. The theory that Sothis herself is the actual missing piece to the Rite working operates under the assumption that at her full power and consciousness, she could find a departed or lost soul and house it back to the body, even if it's stuck in Zahras or some other realm. She effectively did this with Byleth in her child form, no less. The thing is, Rhea clearly has no understanding of this. She documented the Rite of Rising's failure to resurrect Sothis, and she genuinely didn't understand the exact specifics of why it didn't work. Perhaps the apostles warned her this would happen, and she tried to resurrect her anyway. When it resulted in failure, the apostles left the church and remained in hiding. The only one who can play God is the goddess herself. Perhaps that's why it's seen as taboo. There can only be one arbiter of souls. Only one being should have the power to bring the dead back to life. Although, as we will soon learn, that doesn't stop Rhea from creating life herself. This is relevant to the sequel theory, because I believe Sothis will not be resurrected via another attempt at the Rite of Rising if the circumstances are the exact same as the last two. I have read speculation of the Rite of Rising being the core argument for a sequel or alternative universe in which Sothis returns, but like I'm arguing, I think the Rite of Rising is off the table. So what else has been tried to resurrect Sothis? The 12 Vessels. Behind closed doors, Rhea for a millennium continued with her attempts by crafting human bodies and inserting Sothis's crest stone inside them, hoping they would be filled by her consciousness and resume living. None of Rhea's attempts worked, as Sitri, the 12th vessel's predicament, hints each of them became their own person instead, thus meaning Rhea created new life with each try. Byleth's parents are Sitri, a failed Sothis vessel, and Gerald, a man with a major crest of Seros bestowed by Rhea, in the same way that Oban bestowed his crest onto Yuri.
I was there, the day she brought you forth into this world, Sitri had always been frail. Giving birth proved to be too much for her in the end. On that fated day, it looked as though neither of you would survive. In those final moments, she spoke, saying, "My heart, give it to my child." That is correct. The heart that lies within your chest is none other than hers. It was the only way that you could be saved. But Sitri loved others, much as a human might, and I loved her in return.
Thus making Byleth Rhea's 13th attempt at reviving her mom. Rhea gave Byleth Sitri's own heart, in other words, Sothis' creststone. It's both why Byleth's heart doesn't beat, and their personality is quite muted. They are only alive due to unnatural causes. While the attempt did result in the body manifesting Sothis' consciousness, it came with two caveats. Number one, much like previous vessels, Byleth was their own person, and number two, Sothis herself was revived incompletely, and her absence of memories prevents her from assuming her true adult form. So the Sothis we know starting the game is an amnesiac, and it takes months for her to start understanding who she is, up until they need to escape the void. Three Hopes, however, shows us how capable a vessel can be to Sothis. In part 2 of Three Hopes, the following scene takes place in Imperial Year 1183.
Such vexing arrogance for one so small. Perhaps you truly are one of their descendants. In any event, you labored to destroy my vessel, did you not? That is a deed most foul. One you will pay for with your life! You cannot hope to win so bound in flesh. Pitiful.
This isn't a fight you can win. Get out of there!
You can run all you like. Why do you fight me?
Why, Sothis?
A glove does not defy the hand, and yet you've done just that. Sothis is my name, yet I am also called the Beginning. I am progenitor and mother to all who call Fodlan home.
Where am I?
I am not here to answer all you ask. Yet I will grant the one. You stand before my throne. If you so wish, then take a seat. But know then that your flesh is mine to wield. You lack the power to resist.
My flesh? What are you saying?
You should not have interfered! I could have cut that wretch down with a stroke.
This scene occurs after Byleth resists Sothis in her shockingly dark, vengeful takeover in her pursuit of Shez and Arval. This time, she's angry at Byleth, but not in her fussy, impatient way. She's condescending and looks down on them. To her, they're acting like a disobedient vessel of flesh. She also mentions her throne, and that she can take over their body permanently if they sit on it, figuratively. It's not the real throne. It's the one part of the room she's manifesting in Byleth's mind in the same way she can manifest it in Zahras itself. Geralt then wakes them up, thinking that they were sleeping on the ground, but Sothis states otherwise.
You fool! That was no dream!
Later, while Byleth seems to have control in battle, Sothis quickly takes over in her confrontation against either Rodrigue, Judith, or Randolph. And once again, Sothis' potential using Byleth as a vessel is on display. But then, Geralt is killed by Shez, and the two once again converse in her realm.
Honestly, I don't know. Geralt wouldn't want this. He didn't believe in vengeance for vengeance's sake.
Indeed. You could not be more right. Revenge is not a thing you take for someone else. You seek revenge to slake your rage and heal your wounded heart. I know you are prepared to do whatever that you must. I could do this by force, you know. Be grateful then that I asked for your leave at all.
You're right. This has to come from me. And I accept your power. Help me win, no matter what it takes.
Ah, yes. You shall make a most worthy vessel after all. And now, behold all that I have discovered at the edge of time.
Byleth fully accepts Sothis' power and control, and convinces themselves that this is what it takes to be at peace. Sothis' personality in Three Hopes shows a side of her that is cold and vengeful, which is seemingly paradoxical to her nature in Three Houses, where she's Byleth's genuine supportive friend that sacrifices what little remains of her autonomy to free them from Zahras, even though she now knows who she really is. In Three Hopes, we do not see the progenitor god, mother to all, but rather the Felstar, the destroyer. In both games, she and Byleth experience different events and adversaries, fundamentally changing their priorities. Sothis remembers Epimenides, triggering her own desire for vengeance, and takes control over Byleth by force. Byleth loses Gerald, compelling them to concede their autonomy to her in a desperate attempt to kill Shez so they can be at peace with the loss. When Shez and Byleth clash for the final time, both supercharged with their respective entities, Shez kills Byleth, causing a huge burst of energy out of them. Sothis' vessel is destroyed. Though one may think that is also the end of Sothis, it's actually not. Sothis still exists, but she has no vessel, and thus no way of truly belonging to the physical world anymore. The question is, how does that even work? If you're on Team Sequel, you've no doubt seen the argument that Sothis' paired ending with Byleth in Three Houses is proof that Sothis survived the fusion, so let's take a look at it. There are unique conditions for that conversation based on whether the root is Crimson Flower or not, because in that path's final cutscene after Rhea is killed, Byleth's crest stone disintegrates. The one physical link between Byleth and Sothis, the reason why they can even wield the Sword of the Creator to its full power to begin with, disappears. And yet here is Sothis quite literally alive in spirit. But her being here is seemingly bullshit, right? Well, here is what I think happened. Somewhere along the way, Sothis realized that she's basically omnipotent. The crest stone had been reduced to its base functionality of a normal crest stone that can activate a hero's relic, the last of its power probably being used to defibrillate Byleth's still beating heart to get it pumping. Maybe Sothis did that herself. But at this point, Sothis is completely unbound from that stone. Byleth is still her vessel and is still only seen by them. And it sounds silly, but she left this world and simply returned.
I also said I would always be with you. But perhaps you would have preferred it if I had vanished without a trace. You were alone, and so I chose to come back to this world to stay with you.
This is the same Sothis that could manifest her own world in Zahras, the dimension that is supposed to imprison souls forever. Her being here, without that crest anchor, is in my opinion a demonstration of her power as a god. Here's the kicker though. This is a display that given more time, she will continue to remember who she was, and according to the developers, this needs to happen completely if she wants to assume her adult form. It's stated by the developers that in Three Houses, Sothis is incomplete. She doesn't have all of her memories, and in fact, it's her lack of memory on how she was before her death that's preventing her from changing into the adult form that we see in the Fortune's Weave trailer. Question: why does Sothis have the form of a little girl? Please also tell us why Rhea has an obsession with reviving Sothis, Kusakahara. It's because the Sothis that is inside the protagonist is in an incomplete state. She does not even remember her own form, and as such cannot restore herself, which is a result of her look, which is like a halfway there version of her older form. The Sothis that Rhea knows is vastly different, and as such, hearing "I see the form of a young girl" from the protagonist just makes her very puzzled and confused, as there is that gap. In her complete form, she looks just like an adult woman pictured in the ceiling painting. In my opinion, going by the developer's logic, even though in both games she ends up calling herself the progenitor god, it's still not enough. Sure, she remembers the titles of her dragon children, her powers, and even her adversaries, and yet she's still a child. There is still more for her to remember, even if she doesn't realize that for herself. So, let's recap, because I just gave you a lot of information. The three major ways Three Houses and Three Hopes demonstrate both the capability and the limitations Sothis has for a full return. The Rite of Rising, a vessel conceding their autonomy to her, and her vessel simply living long enough for her to continue relearning her powers and memories, and what seems to be implied, remembering her true form. The soul housing theory for the Rite of Rising assumes that the Rite cannot bring Sothis back, as she herself needs to guide a soul back to its quote-unquote flesh. If Sothis, within her current vessel, was fully in control with all of her powers returned, could perhaps properly facilitate that ritual. Although, if the goal is to bring Sothis back, and she's already here, then perhaps Sothis could rehouse herself within her very remains of the sword and god magic her way into her adult form? Who knows, it's god magic. Besides the Rite of Rising shenanigans, Sothis can take over her vessel, but needs her vessel to forfeit themselves to her, as seen in Three Hopes. A hostile takeover could work, but Sothis doesn't seem powerful enough to suppress Byleth. It's possible that if Sothis were present when Rhea got Byleth to sit on Sothis' throne, she might have been able to take control from there. But this is unlikely due to Sothis' relationship to Byleth as a friendly one, and even if Sothis was in her vengeful Fellstar era, Byleth could still resist. Finally, Sothis can simply continue to remember her powers and memories for as long as her vessel is alive. She woke up in Imperial Year 1180, after the Great Hibernation, and within 5 years, give or take from that wake up, she's dimension hopping like a pro, and from the looks of it, her spirit remains despite being disconnected physically from her vessel. If time and experience is all it takes to compel her to remember her past and her powers, then theoretically, she will eventually be able to assume her adult form. Given that she exists in all timelines of Three Houses, but is still spiritually bound to Byleth, then as long as Byleth or their descendants, or possibly anyone that Byleth passes their blood onto, continues to exist, should be able to return in the exact adult form we see. Even then, we have seen that Sothis' throne room also exists in Zahras, so it is entirely possible for Sothis to be just living in Zahras, but at her full power. Like I said at the beginning, all the lore and world building and arguments for Crest and Hero's Relic appearances still work for a sequel, no matter the actual year it is in Fortune's Weave. This theory follows the rule stated by Fire Emblem lead developer Toshiyuki Kusakahara, that if Sothis returns into her adult form, it's because she finally remembered quite literally everything, including all of her powers. This could take decades, could take centuries, who knows? It's important to note that even though this script rigidly follows the rules set out by the game for Sothis' return, and tries to interpret things as accurately as possible when there are admittedly things that are left for interpretation and conjecture, Sothis is one of the most powerful characters in the entire history of Fire Emblem. She is like actually God, not like a Titan or like a very strong God at like Duma or Milla level. She's like the god, like Naga levels of god. So the writers could just bullshit her way back into her adult form because she can do basically everything else at her peak. The sky is literally not the limit for her. The girl came from outer space. So now that I've talked about Fortune's Weave being a prequel, a midquel, or a sequel, I personally would like a prequel or midquel over a sequel. The quote-unquote dragon god returning isn't exactly a novel idea for Fire Emblem. And for me, part of what made Three Houses so interesting is that it subverts that idea with Rhea constantly failing to resurrect her, leading to the creation of our main character, Byleth, to begin with. I fear a story revolving around the desire to resurrect Sothis to reclaim her place as goddess would be playing it safe. The concept feels very Fire Emblem and most recently very Awakening, or I guess maybe even Engage? Moreover, the developers have said that they have no plans to canonize any of the roots. The best way to circumvent that would be making what happened in Fodlan be lost history, but that would sacrifice a giant portion of the vast world building that would be so beneficial about using the universe of Fodlan in the first place. Granted, the Church of Saros seems to be intact, or at the very least the Holy Tomb, but you get my point. A prequel could turn people off too though, because in a sense, they're confined to Three Houses' 1180 start, so there's a so nothing actually matters because we know what happened aspect to it, which can be true. But if Daxian is its own distant continent before Three Houses, then is that just not a familiar setting to Genealogy and 3C776, two of the most critically acclaimed stories in the entire series? I'm just saying, I wouldn't discredit the value of a prequel. Although, I suppose I shouldn't discredit the value of a sequel in the same breath. Last video, I humored the idea of a pre-cycle timeline, one where the Divine Sovereign is a pre-incarnation of Sothis. Following that theme, perhaps this game will be a post-cycle sequel somehow. Regardless, these two videos served a dual purpose, and quite frankly, I'm really proud of these two videos. Yeah, it theorizes Fortune's Weave's setting, but it is also a humongous lore and history lessons of Three Houses and Three Hopes. So even if it's not a sequel, I hope you learned a ton, and let me know what you think of this video and the lore and discussions within. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Deuces.